in Pain, everyone. My name is Erin Sobko, and I will be your moderator for today's session. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before we start, I'd like to acknowledge that I live and work on Treaty 4 territory here in Yorkton, where I am, and different people are living on different treaty territories within Saskatchewan. We also live on the homeland of the Métis. So Partners in Pain grew out of the Improving Pain in Saskatchewan collaborative research project. This project's aims are to give pain a voice by bringing people together to share information and plan action to improve how pain is managed in our province. The research project led to our first pilot series of Partners in Pain webinars in March of 2021. The feedback from the pilot was very positive and led the research team to seek additional funding to help support the initiative. The project received a Community Initiatives Fund community grant in mid-2021 for an additional series of webinars, and that is what brings us here today. And all of this work is supported by the SAS Pain organization, which is on a mission to help improve the lives of those living with pain within Saskatchewan. So webinar etiquette, just a few reminders, which I'm sure you guys all know already. I recognize most of you from past sessions. Please keep yourself muted to minimize background noise. There's going to be an opportunity to ask questions during the session. So please submit your question in the chat box and I'll be sure to share them with Allison. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Alison Kammer. Dr. Kammer will be delivering all sessions this evening, a presentation on healthy eating, nutrition and pain. Dr. Alison Kammer is an assistant professor in the College of Pharmacy and Nutrition at the U of S. She has a BSc in nutrition, a BA in women's and gender studies, a Master's of Science in Community Health and Epidemiology, and a PhD in nutrition. She has been a registered dietitian for over 20 years and loves food. She says grocery shopping, cooking, talking about food, and eating. So now, Allison, I will pass it over to you.
Thanks for that. So screen sharing, okay. So if you hit the next. So what's on the menu? I'm going to do this quick overview of healthy eating and pain. I'll share my personal story and give some practical nutrition examples. So next. Okay, that didn't work out exactly the way I wanted to, and I certainly didn't think that it was going to land with a picture of me wearing a watermelon helmet at the end. So before we get started, I just wanted to introduce myself. I think that knowing a little bit about who I am will hopefully help you understand my approach to nutrition and healthy eating. The pictures would have flown with this, but sorry about that. The first picture is a beautiful photo of a farm because I come from a farm at Webb, Saskatchewan in the southwest corner of the province, mixed farm, cattle and grain. I've been a registered dietitian for over 20 years, did my Master of Science. You heard all of that stuff. It makes me even feel tired hearing the list of the school I did. The next picture is a photo about traveling, a comic saying, let's go and see all the sights, and another character going, no, let's go eat all their food. I love to travel, and I think one of the most exciting parts of travel for me is exploring new and interesting different foods. The next picture would have been a photo of different food trends over the years. And I just wanted to say that dietitians often get a bad rap. We're sometimes called the food police, thought of that way anyway. And I can assure you that most of the dietitians I know love food and staying on top of food trends, to the point that I'm part of a foodie group where we make fun themed meals and explore new and interesting food trends and flavors. And once a friend and I even made the periodic table out of cookies, and you can see the edges of it. It was authentic and it took a long time, and it was also delicious. And of course, like a good Saskatchewanian, I cheer for the riders by sporting a traditional watermelon helmet. Like I said, I love food and I really believe that nutrition should be fun and enjoyable. Next slide. So just a quick note on dietary patterns. I'm going to use the term dietary pattern instead of diet. I think the term diet has connotations of restriction and control and even of depriving yourself, and that's not a great way to live. So when you hear dietary pattern, I want you to think of a regular, consistent way of eating over the long term, not quite as rigidly defined as a diet with strict rules and maybe feelings of failure that come from non-compliance, those terms. So dietary pattern, much more a regular, long-term for your life. I often say I'm not interested in how you eat for the next 30 days. I'm much more interested in how you eat over the next 3,000 or 30,000 days. That's why dietary patterns are important. Next slide. So nutrition is a big subject. So I'm going to give you a quick taste of nutrition and healthy eating as it relates to living with chronic pain. And I'm hopeful that we'll have some time for questions at the end, but I know that I talk a lot, especially when it's about food. I get really excited. We're going to go quick too, but please do put questions in the chat or hold on to them for the end. Next slide. So there's a fair bit of information available about pain and nutrition. And one of the most important things is that you find credible sources of information. An internet search can take you down some interesting paths and expose you to inaccurate information that isn't helpful and can even be dangerous. So this is a web link to an evidence-based resource developed by a team working out of Australia. And the team includes dietitians and nutrition researchers. And the figure on the slide is their explanation of the role of nutrition through a whole person approach to pain management. And this is a solidly good group, very, very evidence-based, produced a systematic review on nutrition and pain and other resources. So that's a good place to start if you want to dig in a little bit more deeply. Next slide too. The figure comes from this resource from Fraser Health because the Australian team has made this tool adaptable for other venues, other places, other jurisdictions. So Fraser Health in BC has adapted it and included the actual visual image. So again, they're depicting the interconnectedness of nutrition in that whole person approach to pain management. And you can see that there are biosocial factors and lifestyle factors, the turquoise and dark circles. It's hard to see. And then the lime green circles show different aspects of nutrition as they relate to them. So starting from the top, stemming from the biomedical properties of nutrition, they describe central sensitization, metaflammation, oxidative stress, and drug reactions. So that's in a nutshell addressing the important role of dietary intake in reducing inflammation. Then stemming from connection, they list isolated from the social aspect of eating. So that's addressing how important meal times and eating are in our social life and our relationship forming. Then stemming from mind body, they list thoughts and emotions affect dietary behavior. Example, comfort eating. And that's to address that sometimes we use food to self-soothe. Then stemming from physical activity on the bottom left, they list energy balance, access to and preparation of food, and poor sleep equals poor intake. So this is describing the interaction between physical abilities and attributes and nutrition. And then finally, stemming from the domain that they just simply call nutrition, they list the therapeutic role for pain and comorbidities, really addressing the fact that the food we eat plays a role therapeutically with our experience of pain and healthy living. That was a lot. Next slide. So some key messages to take away. First, optimizing nutrition can have a significant effect on pain reduction. So our dietary intake can enhance function of our nervous system, our immune system, our endocrine systems, and those directly impact our pain experiences. Second, dietary intake impacts overall health and is often a key factor in managing chronic conditions, which can occur alongside chronic pain. So we want to strive for a healthy dietary pattern that helps with our biological experience of pain and also aids in managing chronic conditions and just optimizes health and well-being overall. And third, pain can complicate the ability to optimize our dietary patterns. Our experience of pain and then energy can affect what we can do and how much effort we can put into our own healthy eating. Next slide. So looking at how pain does affect nutrition and healthy eating, directly, we think of appetite. So some people will experience low appetite and low hunger as a result of pain. And what we eat can directly affect our pain too. So for example, eating regularly and staying hydrated can actually help reduce our sensitization and our experience of pain, can help reduce pain. Under directly and indirectly, pain can impact our mobility and our functional ability. So this can mean we aren't able to go get groceries, prepare food, or even eat. The isolation aspect of experiencing pain can mean the less socialization, less social aspects of food and eating, which for some people means that they eat less than they need, and for some people, maybe more than they need. And for most people, it means an overall reduced enjoyment of food and eating. And then indirectly, pain can make it hard to sleep or sleep well. And lack of sleep can contribute to low energy, which will then impact our functional ability. And irregular sleep patterns can also create irregular eating patterns, which will then in turn affect sleep and appetite and mood and energy. So it can create this vicious cycle that you want to prevent, or if it's happening, you want to interrupt it and treat it. So now I want to talk briefly about 3 important considerations of nutrition and healthy eating with pain. The first one is hydration. This is a common message. It's important to stay hydrated, but it's even more important for managing pain because dehydration can increase your sensitivity and experience of pain. So it's good to try and drink regularly throughout the day. And you want to try and make water your drink of choice. So typically people are aiming for 2 to 3 liters of fluid per day. And that sounds like a lot, but some of that fluid can be coming from the foods you eat too, when you think of like a soup or a stew or vegetables and fruit. And then how do you know if you're hydrated? Well, the easiest way is to look at your urine. You want a soft yellow hue. If it's darker than normal, you need to drink more. Next slide. So dietary fiber is important for overall health. We know that Canadians in general get far too little. Dietary fiber has a whole list of health benefits. Provides feelings of satiety or fullness when we eat. It slows gastric emptying, which helps to regulate our blood sugar. It helps to reduce blood cholesterol levels. But the health benefit that's especially important to consider in terms of pain is the role that fiber plays in gut motility. Another way to say that is the role that fiber plays in keeping us regular. So constipation is something that's commonly experienced when you're experiencing pain. There are a few reasons for that. Activity and exercise help our gut motility, help things to move. If we have a time when we're not moving as much, we experience less gut motility. Also the eating, all the different aspects of that can contribute. And constipation is a side effect of many medications that are commonly used to treat and manage pain. So including anything with codeine, opioids, and even common NSAIDs like aspirin, ibuprofen, and naproxen. They all have constipation as a side effect. Constipation isn't fun, just full stop. It causes its own type of discomfort, but it can also exacerbate chronic pain. And that's where fiber comes in. So ensuring that we have a good intake of fiber can help prevent constipation. So generally, we're aiming for about 25 to 30 grams each day. I don't even want to tell you what the national average intake is. And fiber comes from our whole grains, vegetables and fruits, pulses like beans or lentils, nuts and seeds. And as a side note, it's very interrelated with hydration. You want to stay very well hydrated when increasing your fiber intake to keep the flow going. Next slide. So weight is an interesting and complex topic, but if I didn't bring it up, I think you'd have questions. So we know that being at a higher weight comes with health risks, and we know carrying a higher weight can put more pressure on our body's joints, and it can make it more challenging to move easily, and it can be a source of chronic inflammation. And all of these things affect pain. So the general advice is to try and maintain a healthy weight. I did a quick scan of resources about managing pain, and maintaining healthy weight is listed on the majority of them. So if you are under or overweight, this of course doesn't mean that all is lost. We really want to move away from catastrophic thinking or from all or nothing thinking, particularly regarding weight and body size. Something really important, I think, to hear is that crash diets with rapid weight loss, not healthy. You're likely to lose a lot of muscle mass, which is far worse than having that important muscle tissue within a bigger body. And decades of research on restrictive diets and rapid weight loss shows that over the long term, people often regain the weight they lost and more, and have negative health consequences. Something else to be aware of is that weight stigma and weight discrimination have profoundly negative impacts. Can lead to reduced participation in therapeutic activities and treatments that manage pain. And weight neutrality, having a neutral view of our body size and shape and the number on the scale for ourselves is really important for ourselves and towards others. That's a better aim. So the things to focus on are moving our bodies and eating well to nourish our valuable bodies. My recommendation is to pursue enjoyable activities and healthy eating strategies. And if your weight changes slowly over time as a result, neat. And if it doesn't, the only side effect is that you'll still likely feel better. Next slide. So now let's talk briefly about a promising dietary pattern for pain. So inflammation is something that occurs in our bodily processes. Like many things in life, a little is good, but too much is bad. The example I think we might be familiar with is that we need a little inflammation to build muscle tissue. That movement causes a little inflammation, and then that lays down the muscle tissue to build. But too much inflammation causes damage, and chronic inflammation just isn't good. And we know that inflammation plays a big role in pain. So in terms of nutrition, what we call the Western dietary pattern, which is high in ultra-processed convenience foods, high in energy, salt, sugar, and fat, and low in fiber, low in vegetables and fruit and antioxidants. So that Western dietary pattern, it's pro-inflammatory, meaning that it causes inflammation and oxidation by increasing things like C-reactive protein, pro-inflammatory cytokines, and reactive oxygen species. Say that quickly 3 times. So dietary patterns that have been shown to be anti-inflammatory are high in polyphenols, antioxidants, micronutrients, and omega-3 fatty acids. Those are a lot of names of compounds that not important to remember. What is important to remember is that we eat food, not nutrients. So the foods to think about in an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern are fiber, bright, colorful vegetables and fruits, quality proteins, healthy oils, and very low amounts of ultra-processed convenience foods that are high in sugar, salt, and less healthy fats. Next slide. So what are anti-inflammatory dietary patterns? There are many actually that have been studied and have a solid, good evidence base to support them. And these include the Mediterranean dietary pattern that likely most of you have heard of in some way, shape, or form. And then there's the DASH diet. DASH stands for Dietary Approaches to Reduce Sodium Hypertension. And then the MIND diet, that's Mediterranean DASH Intervention for Neurodegenerative Delay. Again, quite a mouthful. So that's combining the Mediterranean and DASH diet components and adding a few nutrients that are known to be cognitively protective. And it's an anti-inflammatory dietary pattern that's been studied. And then also the Nordic dietary pattern and Canada's food guide. And there are others. Next slide. So when we look at these dietary patterns, we see similarities in messages about variety and moderation. And we see similar lists of what to eat more of, like colorful vegetables and fruit, whole grains, fish, lean meat, unsaturated oils, nuts and seeds. And we see similarities of what to eat less regularly, like less saturated fat, limited ultra-processed foods, because those are the foods typically really high in fat, sugar, and salt. I'm just going to touch on Canada's food guide. Next slide. A little bit because we're Canadian and it's a resource that's available to us. So it was updated in 2019 to be entirely evidence-based without influence from industry or lobbyists or marketing boards. the level that they went to protect the scientists working on it from any influence, perceived or real, from marketing lobbyists, etc., was almost absurd, almost, but very much to be non-biased, and that was very important. So the messages are to eat a variety of healthy foods each day, have plenty of vegetables and fruit, eat protein foods, choose whole grains, and make water your drink of choice. Next slide. So they do talk about what you should eat, but they also, in the New Canada's Food Guide, talk about how you eat, saying it's more than just the foods that you eat. You want to be mindful of your eating habits, trying to notice when you feel full and stopping eating then, and not depending on outside cues like if there's still things left on your plate, that kind of stuff. Cook more often, because then you're likely to have less sugar, salt, and fat. Enjoy your food, very important. Eat with others, use food labels, limit foods high in sodium, sugars, or saturated fat, and be aware of food marketing. Next slide. So this is just a screen grab of one of the many resources available on the Canada's Food Guide website. And when you get the slides sent to you, you'll have these links. So this is one about meal planning, cooking, and healthy choices. And you can see that there's arrows on either side because there's even more than just a section on diets and food trends to look into, or improving your dietary habits, or adjusting recipes to meet your needs. There's also a full section on recipes, timing of meals, nutrient needs, all sorts of things. So that's available and it's free for you to check out. Next slide. So optimizing nutrition can sound easy, but if we're being realistic, change is really hard. Healthy eating can be complicated, and there are a lot of factors that contribute to our ability to do so. So with that, I want to really emphasize that small, meaningful changes that you can and will do over the long term are so much more effective than massive change that you actually just can't sustain. The return on investment is much greater for a small but meaningful improvement that you can do for years and years and years than a big change that you can only maintain for a week. Like I said, not interested in your next 30 meals. I'm not interested in your next 3,000. Next slide. So healthy eating includes the physiological benefits of the nutrients that go into our body and the quality of life benefits of feeling good and enjoying what we eat, where and who we eat with. I always say that nutrients fuel our bodies, but food fuels our spirits. And ideally, we're striving for a balance where both aspects are contributing to good health and well-being, with awareness that the scales may tip to one or the other at different meals or at different times in our life. Balance is aspirational. It's something to aim at, but not beat yourself up at if you don't hit that bullseye every single time. Next slide. So again, anything I've said today, please don't let that override any medical advice that you've had for a particular chronic condition or health concern. But if you have specific dietary needs or questions about your very, very particular set of circumstances and contexts, seek help from a registered dietitian. They're covered on health insurance plans, and sometimes it will just say nutritionist, sometimes it will say naturopath, sadly, and you just have to phone and ask to have it confirmed that they're covered. Next slide. I think here we can pause for questions, if there are questions.
Any questions from the crowd? You can either type them in the chat or raise your hand with that reaction button at the bottom. And you can unmute yourself then and ask Allison anything.
You can feel free to wait to the end too. I just blasted a lot of information at you in a quick amount of time.
Allison, we have a question in the chat, actually a few. What is a good way to increase protein?
Ooh, that's a good question. And again, you really want to tailor it to your own likes and what you enjoy eating. But an easy way, I'm going to show you at the end. we'll put a pin in that, and I'll show you in the practical strategies in my nutrition hacks. So how to add protein to make sure you're getting protein at each meal.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just before
Kathy and
pass that
or
on,
Susan
Erin,
are saying that,
I just want to say one thing, that you want to
yeah,
think broadly about protein. It's not just in meat. And I grew up on a cattle farm, so my go-to is beef. Love it. But you also want to think about plant-based proteins like pulses, beans, nuts, and then we'll go into some specific examples.
I would like to know, I'm on permanent disability, which I realize a lot of people are. And with that comes an extremely restrictive income. So how do you stay on track nutrition wise when you basically can't afford 3/4 of what's out there?
Oh, Dana. Oh, Dana.
It's a huge question.
It's a huge question. And please just, before I have my answers, know that dietitians are lobbying for an increased cost of living. We do something in Saskatchewan, we do what's called a healthy food basket, and we actually go survey the province, go to different grocery stores and figure out what is the cost of a healthy food basket for a week. And then there's a full report and everything, and these recommendations go to government to show this is what, and we're not talking a fancy food basket, a general healthy eating food basket. So we're increasing our lobbying efforts in light of the fact that the grocery prices they're saying that we can expect just general across the board $1,000 more per year in the upcoming year. That's the estimate. So we're increasing our lobbying efforts and trying to make sure that at least the policy, they need to be aware that if people aren't able to achieve healthy living, you're going to pay further down the line. Somewhere in the system will bear the cost. So we're trying really hard to get that message out. So know that. Some of the hacks that I tell you are very cost effective. I always try to keep that in mind. So I will talk a little bit about things like, for example, any kind of stew or soup or anything that's like a sauce, like a ground beef thing, you can mix half meat with half pulses. Pulses are really cheap. You can substitute pulses into different meals. You can add different things like, I'll show you practically so that you can see the products that I'm actually speaking about. But you're not faced with an easy situation. Just please know that I get that. You're not going to hear me saying that you need to have sirloin tip and béarnaise sauce with perfect saffron rice. Like, no.
No, well, even just like a tin of, honestly, the other day I was just shocked, a tin of Campbell's soup. It was a vegetable soup. I thought I was going to have just a basic vegetable soup for a lunch. And I looked at the tin and it was 32% sodium.
Yeah.
In one tin of soup. It was like, good Lord, who wants to eat just nothing but salt?
And we've also, the food labeling has changed. So they have until the end, industry has until the end of 2022 to comply. But if you saw a label that said 35% of that's a new label. And that's to spell it out so that people don't have to go, I don't know, is that a lot of sodium? So the new labels are, I think, going to be helpful for people, even just to make comparison between different products.
yeah, thanks for that question. That was a really great question. Does anyone else have a question before we move on? Anyone else with a question?
There used to be a dietitian number. Do they have that anymore, or do they got?
Oh, Linda, you have just reminded me of something that I'm going to add into the slides that I forgot. So at the University of Saskatchewan, we have what's called Eat Well, and it's Dial a Dietitian re-envisioned because they lost the funding for Dial a Dietitian, but Eat Well Nutrition exists, and you can phone, you can email, You can follow them on social media, but you can do that phone call contact, and that it does exist. So I will add that into the slides so that you have the web links and can seek her out. The dietitian's name is Carrie, and she is lovely. So now I'm going to try to talk about a few nutrition hacks for achieving good enough, and maybe throw out a few tips for planning. Hopefully they'll be useful to you. Hopefully. Okay, the first one is about beans. I talked about increasing beans. This is going to be a little self-revelatory, if you will. Dietitian, right? Oh, here's my life hack. This is as good as this if you can't make this. So this is, hold on, I'm going to adjust my pile of cookbooks so that you can see better. So dried beans, for sure, they're your gold standard. They have high amount of protein. So a half cup has 21 grams of protein. That's a huge amount of protein for a half cup serving of something. And they have 10 milligrams of sodium. But these you need to soak overnight and then cook. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. And I was a perfectionist that this is how I would do things. And this was what, because my family needed properly soaked beans that were well prepared that way. Guess what I learned? Not eating beans because you don't have the time and energy to soak and plan and prepare. Not as good as having a can of beans. And you can look for ones that have a lower amount of sodium. But just for comparison, there's about 110 milligrams of sodium in a half cup serving, but you've still got your good amount of fiber and good amount of protein. So beans, very high in nutrients, soluble fibers, 6 grams, low in sugar, high in protein. So this isn't as high in sodium as I think sometimes we mythologize that this will be, oh, this will be terrible. You can't have a can of beans. Another tip, when you're using canned beans like this is pinto beans, but navy beans, white beans, what have you, rinse them. When you take the can out and drain them, rinse them. Take some of the sodium off. And then another comparison being, okay, refried beans. Here's where you get into, this has got 500 milligrams of sodium for comparison to the pinto beans. So if you have the energy to mash or puree the pinto beans with some spices like some vinegar and chilies, etc., it's going to be a better option. But again, if you're going to take this choice, maybe balance it out with things that are low in sodium. Have things like whole wheat wraps, etc., with them. A friend a while ago, I had demystified just a basic can of beans and tomato sauce. Again, they're a little bit higher in sodium, 390 milligrams of sodium, and we're aiming like 3 to 4 grams in a day. So they're a little higher, but they're also very convenient, and they're a nice source of protein and fiber. High in fiber, so you're going to have that gut motility, but also protein and the nice soluble fiber, etc. And very low in saturated, well, no saturated fat. Let me confirm that before I say, yeah, 0.5 grams of saturated fat. So there's my spiel on beans. Again, perfectionist, good enough. Better than not eating them and not having the key nutrients and the good source of fiber and going, whatever, I'll just eat chips instead because I haven't achieved perfection by using my Instant Pot for my beans. Similarly, we've got lentils. Another very, very good source of protein. Bag of lentils, very low in, like, not a source of fat really. Good source of dietary fiber, high source of protein, iron, etc. But again, these need to be cooked. So 2 hacks with these. If you're going to cook, and they're very cheap in dry form, and you don't need that much. This is red lentils, but there's a whole different varieties you can get. Green, French lentils, yellow lentils, black lentils, etc. And you can try them. They have different flavors and different textures. This is the most common one. When someone says lentils, they usually mean red or brown lentils. So a hack for this is if you have the energy to cook it, cook a lot and then put them into small containers, even just little baggies, and freeze them. in, 1 cup portions that you can pull out of the freezer when you want to use. But again, can of lentils, still good. When you compare the sodium, yeah, there's 180 milligrams of sodium, but rinse it, and it's still better than throwing the baby out with the bath water, if you will, and going with something that's completely unhealthy because you need it to be perfect, if that makes sense. But yeah, if you have the energy, and Susan's written, good idea to put them in freezer bags, small portions. Another one is if you want really small portions, to get a large ice cube tray, put them in the ice cube tray sides and then pop them out into a bag, and then they're in sort of little pucks. Terrible way to call that, but there you go. Okay, moving on to oatmeal. Again, this would be, here's your perfection, is steel cut oats. This is going to have your highest bang for your buck in terms of fiber and protein. So the steel cut, it takes longer to cook, or the longest to cook of the different types of oats, steel cut oats. If you don't have time, moving on to just large flake oats, still good, still a good source of fiber. So comparing the fiber, 4 grams, 3 grams. Is that the same serving? These are old labels, so I have to actually check the serving size. On the new nutrition labels, they have standardized the serving sizes, so different products have to have the same thing, so you don't end up on a Zoom going, wait, are these the same serving size? Let me check. So this is pretty much higher because this is a 1/4 cup serving and this is a 1/3 cup serving. So higher in fiber, but still 3 grams of fiber.
Allison?
Yeah.
Allison, there's a question in the chat. What can I use to substitute butter in my Christmas baking recipes? I've tried a 1/2 butter, a 1/3 butter with yogurt, apple butter, or milk. Do you have any suggestions? She says she loves baking and she's focusing her diet on low fat and low sugar.
So, I'll tell you my spiel. For Christmas baking, if you can do it, great. And I'll loop back to that. But no one's eating Christmas baking to get healthy. So if you're going to, my opinion is maybe controversial to some people, but if you're going to make something like a butter tart or shortbread, butter is the appropriate item for that because it's an indulgence, and there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of an indulgence. You're not going to eat shortbread cookies for breakfast for 30 meals in a row or 300 meals in a row. So I would say keep your indulgences, keep the things that you love that are lovely that way, keep them, and find the other ways elsewhere. But for example, with baking things like muffins, where that is something that you might eat much more regularly than a Christmas baking treat, then I would do, buttermilk. Buttermilk is great. It bakes really, really well. Buttermilk and healthy oils, and yeah, Basil and non-hydrogenated margarine is fine. So that's a bit controversial. So there, if you really feel that you want to do that and you're really committed, then yes, you can try. You have to try sort of mixtures. For anything chocolate, you can use baby food prunes are a good substitution. You can also use pureed lentils, and that gives you some of the mouthfeel that replacing fat would do. And you can go on Pulse Growers Saskatchewan, just Google that, and you'll have tons of recipes on how to incorporate pulses, etc. But yeah, that's a tough one for me because I would say keep the butter. You're not eating that to be healthy. Just don't have it 700 times during Christmas.
That's great. And someone says that Dawn says they like using black beans. I do too. So we have 4 minutes left.
4 minutes left, and I'm going to
would
do
you
my
like to
hydration
do-
hack. Hydration hack. And I am a terrible dietitian for staying hydrated. It's terrible. It's my biggest challenge. It's embarrassing. Get a nice water bottle. Keep it with you. Fill it up. invest in a mug that you like, that you will want to keep with you and have it ready. There are things like I bought water enhancers. I'm not even kidding. They're little cold infusions, but you don't even have to buy them. Put drops of lemon juice, throw the end of apple core will flavor your water if that's what's going to make it more palatable. But have the reminders and make it a habit. Anytime you can pair something like, for example, I have my vitamin D drop every morning in my coffee, and I can do that because I put milk in my coffee. I don't know if having it black would be good, but you pair it with something that you regularly always would do. So now every time I get up to go to the bathroom, I also fill up my water bottle, or go, oh dear, I don't need to fill it up because I wasn't drinking it. And it's a reminder to drink some. I told you I could talk way too much. I'm sorry.
It's a very interesting topic. I know I could listen to you for another 2 hours, I'm sure. I find it very interesting. Are there any last minute questions for Allison? Anyone? Any burning questions that you have? Dawn says she keeps her Brit jug on the counter as a visual for water intake. People are thanking you now, Allison, for a great session. So I will also thank you for a great session. It was very interesting. So some last minute housekeeping for everyone. Recordings of the webinars will be available on the SAS Pain website. The link to these will be shared with you by email. The email will be sent to you tomorrow with any slides, handouts, or any other helpful links that we talked about today. It will also include a link to the evaluation. So please take some time to fill that evaluation out. We want to know how we're doing. Our next webinar is scheduled for Tuesday, January the 18th at 6:30 p.m. And our theme is caregiver well-being. Please watch for more information on the session schedule and topics for 2022 coming soon. And please share information about this webinar with your family and friends and other social circles. So there's lots more information in the chat. People are commenting, and thank you for joining, everyone. Thank you, Allison, and have a very happy holidays, and we'll see you in 2022.